These are slums in the Golden City of Jerusalem, and these slum dwellers are Jews who came in search of the Promised Land. They are Oriental Jews from North Africa and the Middle East, and for them the dream has turned sour. In Israel, 20% of the population live on or below the poverty line. In a nation of only 3 million people, there are 200,000 underprivileged families. They are the other face of Israel.
I didn't think things would be like this in Israel. I thought I would live like I did in Iraq. I lived in Iraq. We didn't live in these conditions. We were 9 or 10 in the family. But we had a 16-room house. My father was not a workman. He worked in the government. We didn't live in conditions like this. My husband works as a simple workman, earns 500 pounds a month, sometimes 600, sometimes 400. He hasn't got steady working times. He hasn't got so much time because he has a bad liver. Here my son grew up and he has to help me by working, but in another month he has to go into the army. I can't object and say my son won't go to the army till we get good conditions, or until my husband gets a good salary. I can't say that. Because why? Because this is our state. We have no other choice. If they pull down this neighborhood and we leave, people from the Knesset will build good housing and live here, because we're only a stone's throw away from the Knesset. Then they'll throw us into another poor neighborhood, wherever they can, because we're all here by the grace of the city. We're all indebted to the city who owns our dwellings. We're all welfare clients. We don't know when this suffering will stop and when the children will get reasonable conditions, when the children will be able to continue to learn and to be educated. We're afraid for the future of our children.
What were you demonstrating against or for?
For one thing, I describe myself as a Zionist. I don't see Zionism just as a sending of people to Israel. I think Zionism would have to be the building of a state, a just state. In the year I've been in Israel, I've found out about the existence of a most terrible social gap, most extreme poverty, which exists in Jerusalem, for example. I believe worse in Tel Aviv.
Did this surprise you when you came here? I mean, you came an idealistic young Zionist from England.
I came to Israel. Well, I'll give you an example. When I was in England, I'd find out, I'm sure most of the people on this program, watching the program, the Jews especially, would hear about injustices and figure that, well, it's conceivable that these injustices don't exist. I was very, very surprised to find that injustices do exist, that this is by no means a totally free and democratic state, that
well, there is poverty.
There is poverty, there's repression by the government.
The root of the problem is a fact that when those Panthers began to demonstrate, it came like earthquake, how is it? See? The people began to fear and began to think. They did more than all of the leaders of the Sephardim did in 20 years.
The Panthers have made people think.
Made more than they thought to do. See? The Panthers are primitives. They demonstrate. They're crying. But the echo was so strong that the nation in outside began to ask questions. And here the establishment was forced to begin to think about the future.
If nothing major is done by the government, do you fear for the future?
Yes, we are fear, and how we fear. And
what do you fear?
We fear that there will be here two nations, divided.
Few European Israelis ever go near the Katamon district on the outskirts of Jerusalem, but 35,000 Oriental Jews live here. From the outside, the buildings do not look like slum dwellings. Inside, they are usually spotlessly clean and desperately overcrowded. It is in housing that the gulf between the European haves and the Oriental have-nots can be most clearly seen. 46% of all Oriental families live in crowded conditions. Only 12.5% of Europeans live in similar conditions. There is little hope of escape from this background. In Israel, a 3-room flat costs £7,000 sterling. Few buildings are built for rent. In the past months, there has been a growing awareness in Israel that something must be done about the Orientals' plight if a social explosion is to be avoided. One who has studied the problem closely is sociologist Dr. Jona Rosenfeld. Dr. Rosenfeld, one of the things that strikes anybody coming here, especially from a country like England, is the lack really of social services, of welfare services for the poor and the overcrowded and people like that. Why is this?
Well, I think people don't like to think that this country, which has been built up on so much idealism, has not succeeded to do something against one of the a very serious problem about the social problems. I think there's been relatively little thought about the social problems. I think there's been some kind of hope that when one comes to the promised land, the social problems will be obviated, and that idealism alone can really do something about them. And as a consequence of this, the amount of thought given, the amount of investment of manpower, brain power, and to some extent also money has been rather limited.
Well, one of the things, I mean, you mentioned money, and one always hears in Israel, I mean, that there isn't the money available for these things because of the situation. Is this the case? Is it money that's holding it back?
Well, you know, I mean, as a social worker, I always say it's a matter of money, and of course not enough money is invested. But if I think what has happened in the last few years, much more money is invested now than has been in the past, so obviously not enough. But the real problem is the dearth of ideas. There's really very little thought, as I said before, given. And in the area of social welfare, for the last 20, 25 years, I think the number of new ideas which have come up of Israel are very limited, actually. You see, in Israel, we don't have what you have in England and in America, in a more limited way, family welfare services. That has never developed in Israel.
Is there a particular Jewish reason for this?
Well, I really don't know. I mean, I don't think I have a very good reason. I mean, there is a belief that a family is a holy unit, and there's perhaps a lack of realization that being a family, even a Jewish family, in this day and age, it isn't simple. If you think about those families who came from Iraq or from Morocco, what it means to them to live with their poor equipment, and I don't mean money, but their education equipment, their occupational, their knowledge about work and the tensions within the family, how they can really cope with this complex life is really quite amazing, how they can do it without external assistance. You know how hard it is for you and for me if you come to New York the first time. You are dazzled for the first few days, and how dazzled they must be.
Now it's the duty of the country, of the authorities, to do the best for them, to help them, to change the atmosphere in general, to encourage them, to give money, to send them to schools, special schools, from the early beginning, from 3 and 4 years old. As I remember my childhood, I know that I have to fight a lot in order to improve myself, to show that I'm just as good as the other good. And I have to be excellent in class in order that they will accept me to their company. And that made me so ambitious. So it was so easy. The parents has nothing later on to do anything because I felt it.
Many people who I've spoken to while I've been in Israel looking at the problem of Sephardics have expressed to me the fear that unless something is done urgently, there will be a divided Israel, two Israels. Do you, as Sephardics yourself, do you share this fear yourself?
Yes, I share this feeling. I think it will be if nothing will be done as early as possible.
Do you think it's divided now to some extent?
Yes, I think it is, because only the war now united the nation. And if it was not war here now, the people will feel they're divided.
On the outskirts of Haifa, the industrial heart of Israel, there is the Technion, which offers many Orientals hope of escape from poverty. A special course for Oriental soldiers is run by the army, the one great unifying force in Israel. There is no class distinction on the Suez Canal. The Technion takes promising Orientals in their last year of army service and subjects them to a 9-month crash course. They study to diploma level in such subjects as mathematics, physics, science, Hebrew and English. When they leave, they are ready for a job, and the army, who will call the men back for a month's service every year until they are 49, will also benefit. The Ben Shemen School near Tel Aviv, an escape from the slums for a few lucky children. The Ben Shemen School has 500 acres of land and equips the children who go there for kibbutz life. It has had grander successes. Israel's present Minister of Transport was once a pupil there. Unfortunately, it is the only place of its kind in Israel. But for the children from the teeming slums, the school provides something even more important than tuition in the principles of animal husbandry: tranquility. In this atmosphere, young Orientals flower and reach a potential very few could hope for in the slums. The Katamon is surrounded by new housing projects. They are not for the Orientals, many of whom resent the fact that new immigrants from Russia are given priority in housing. In Israel, the folks that live on the hill or in the new tower blocks are nearly all European, and so too are those who run the country. Only 18 out of the 120 members of Israel's parliament are Sephardic, and there are only 2 Sephardic cabinet ministers. The Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Yitzhak Navon.
There is much ignorance in the country, also among the leaders of this country, as what really they are, the Sephardim or the Orientals. What are the thoughts? What is their heritage? What is their culture? There is complete ignorance. And the criteria by which you judge a person is a little bit different when you talk with an Oriental or when you talk with an Ashkenazi or European man. In that respect, I think a lot must be done. In this respect, the government, busy with so many problems, I think it should dedicate itself much more than in the past to solve the crucial problem of the housing, of the large families, which is the main problem of this country, I think, and the Orientals, because most of them are Orientals. Secondly, to try and form a program of understanding, of learning, of seeing, of absorbing the culture of these people. And those who come from Oriental countries, seeing a Western society, a very energetic and capable society, they were the first to come here, and more organized people, somehow they feel that their culture is inferior and they try to hide it. They try to bury it.
Can the Orientals really absorb, though? Because Israel, in its structure, its political structure and its attitudes, is a very Western country, or a sort of piece of Central Europe on the edge of the Mediterranean, and yet with this vast population of people coming from entirely different culture, with entirely different attitudes. Hasn't Israel really got to make up its mind what kind of country it is?
Yes, you are right. And if you ask my personal opinion, I would like to see, if I take an example from agriculture, let us say, if you have a garden, and rose is a very beautiful flower, but I don't want it to, in my garden, only roses. I would like to have some daffodils, to have some Yasmin with Oriental blend. On one thing, I won't like to make any compromise. I want this society in Israel to be Western on two basic items. One, the concept of regime. I want a Western democracy in Israel. I don't want to make any compromise with Oriental countries. And Jews who come from North Africa or Kurdistan or Iraq, I would not accept their concept of what a regime is. Secondly, I would like to have the latest conquest of modern science, the technical achievements of the West. So in science and technology, and on the concept of regime, I want it to be a Western society. But on the cultural aspect, I think every community has to offer. Every community has its folklore, has its wisdom, its wit, its tradition, its heritage. And I would like it to be a free market, free for all, and let everyone contribute from his own, whatever it has got, and let the outcome be decided by nature, by itself.
A few days after the illegal Panthers demonstration, which had been broken up by the police, the authorities allowed another demonstration outside the World Zionist Congress. It was a curiously tame affair. Protests by consent, with everyone, including the police, on their best behavior. But by this time, the message of the demonstrators had got home to many of the delegates. The Congress devoted a special session to the question of Israel's social problems. Young delegates came to the windows to support the demonstration, and on the Congress floor, they made it clear that they are as much concerned with poverty in Israel as they are with the survival of the Jewish state. One of those campaigning for the Oriental Jews is an American rabbi, Professor Arthur Hertzberg. I know that when I put this kind of program on in London, there will be criticism from London Jews of this program. People will say that it's exaggerated, that we shouldn't, that if there is a problem, in any case, it's Israel's problem. Do you share that view?
What I think your callers from Golders Green and other parts of the United Kingdom might be calling in about is the notion that to suggest that Israel's problems are unique or unparalleled or particularly biting, or that Israel has been immoral in ignoring them, is a wrong idea. I share. Israel is not immoral. It has not neglected them with any conscious effort. Israel has simply had a particularly difficult set of social problems thrust upon her, which it has wrestled with on and off throughout its existence, which are now coming to a boil, and which it is now beginning to face quite seriously.
It's not just Israel's problem, is it, though? I mean, you believe that World Jewry has a responsibility. What responsibility does it have?
Well, if World Jewry has the responsibility, has accepted the responsibility for the survival of Israel, for its the widest nature of its concerns, we certainly have a responsibility for the nature of Israel's society, that it be a just and a humane society to all its citizens, that there be equality within this society, within human reason, that there not be within its society an element which feels itself totally outside the mainstream of that society. And certainly World Jewry, not only with counsel, but also with material help, must direct its efforts towards equality, towards justice, towards the end of the feelings of being left out by parts of Israel's society.
If nothing is done, or if not enough is done, how do you see this problem developing?
I see developing something which, I'm not the inventor of this phrase, I see developing the two Israels. Golda Meir has used that phrase on occasion, though the Prime Minister of Israel is, of course, particularly sensitive to criticism of Israel. Louis Pinchas, the chairman of the executive of the Jewish Agency and of the World Zionist Organization, has used the phrase, if this problem is not dealt with, there will be two Israels. There will be a Western, European, American, technological, middle-class Israel, and there will be the Israel of North Africans, not of all the Sephardim, not of the Iraqis or the Egyptians, who are quite Western too, but the Israel of the North Africans, not educated, angry, and apart from society. And such an eventuality would be a horror of immeasurable proportions.